Let's bring on senior writer at the Allentown Morning Call, Tom Housenick. Tom, baseball's getting to the end of the season. How you doing today, man?
Surviving. One more homestand for the Iron Pigs, and I think we're done because they're 3 games back in Durham, and Durham's not losing. So no playoffs for the Pigs this year.
Okay, well then, if there's no playoffs for the Pigs, why don't we still want to talk a little bit about the prospects, but let's talk about the other ones that are just surviving at this point, which is the Phillies. What are you seeing out of the Phillies that concerns you right now? Let's start with
It
that.
concerns me. They're kind of maddening. It's pretty cool that they can feel like they can come back from any deficit, but then they can also turn around and still blow that game. So again, I still think that aside from the Braves, there's nothing really certain in the National League, and that gives a lot of optimism for Phillies fans. But at the same time, they've seen what's gone on here for about 3 or 4 months. The inconsistency in virtually every aspect of that team. I gotta love, like I said, I love their passion, their enthusiasm, and there's a lot to like. But there's also, that fear that they could be one game at home.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot to like, especially on offense. However, nothing seems to be going right as with regard to pitching. The bullpen seems to be imploding. The starting pitching doesn't seem to be as strong. You wonder whether they're going to even hold up. Lorenzen had 2 great games and then went back to being, average at best. How are they going to survive a deep run in the playoffs? Is it just going to be that they're going to have to hit their way to a World Series this year?
There's no doubt there's going to be some games where they're going to have to do that. But I think, again, especially until you get to a 7-game series, you've got Zach Wheeler, and I still believe in Nola, and Christopher Sanchez has shown me a lot. I always thought highly of him when he was here, and I watched the yo-yoing kind of play games with him mentally, but I think he's finally come to terms with that, and I think we've seen a good side of him, a consistent side of him. So I think he's a guy that they can rely on in a lot of different roles because that's what they've thrown at him the last few years. And I think he's a guy that's going to be valuable, whether Lorenzen comes through for what we saw in the first 2 starts or what we saw since. I think they have some options, and I'm not as concerned about their bullpen. I think some of those guys will, once it's crunch time, once they're in a playoff situation, I think some of them are going to be fine, and obviously the bullpen gets shortened. I like Alvarado's season overall. I mean, again, we want everybody to be perfect. We want Kimbrel to not be 30-some years old and on the backside of his career. But I think once you get to the playoffs, that's a different level. And I think somebody like him has experienced a lot of that, and he's going to be fine too.
Well, I just want him not to tip his pitches, but I want to just step back a second. You said something that I don't. You feel that I don't feel at all, which is you said you still have confidence in Nola. What gives you the sense that Nola can come through in the playoffs when the season has been so up and down for him?
I just think he's a guy who is not going to be flustered by the moment, and he's not going to say, "Oh, I've got to throw a perfect game here. I've got to throw perfect pitches." I just think he's a guy who will just keep his level head and realize that it is playoff time. I've been here, and not worry about what happened in the past where he has been so up and down. It's hard to kind of figure. He has the stuff, and I think that will come out. The same with Wheeler. I mean, I don't look at Wheeler's last start against the Braves and get nervous. He made a couple of bad pitches and to the wrong guys, and he got burned. But I think come playoff time, he's going to be an ace.
I don't worry Nola's not going to be up for the moment. I'm more concerned with his splits with runners on base versus bases empty. I mean, batters are hitting 214 with the bases empty, 287 with runners on, 297 with them in scoring position. I mean, he's normally between 244 and 249 for the season, and he looks flustered when there get to be runners on and the pitch clock's counting down. That's my concern, is that of all the players on this team, he seems to be the one with Kimbrel who really hasn't adjusted to the pitch clock.
I mean, there is a lot to that. There's no question. I see it in AAA. I see when guys get sent down or they get on rehab starts and they're looking around at clocks and their mind's racing and they can't get a rhythm. Again, I think we've seen an entire season of sometimes Nola can't stop things when they start going downhill, and a lot of that starts with first and second, nobody out. Again, I think he's going to be able to rely on his stuff and kind of find the calmness within the craziness. Why he would have that in the playoffs and not have it consistently in the regular season, I don't know. But I've always kind of felt that he doesn't let the moment get too big, and the bigger the moment, I think the better he can become. And I'm just, I don't know. It's a feeling more than it is. It's not a numbers thing because the numbers tell you the opposite. But he's one of those guys that I'm not worried about him.
Talk to us a little bit about what you saw in Sanchez that this season turned out to be as promising as it did. What was it? What was he working on? What changed for him that he was able to turn in this kind of season, which is pretty impressive for a fifth or sixth starter?
He's one of those guys where I think it was more mental than anything else. We've seen guys the last 5 years from Aniel De Los Santos, Cole Irvin, Jake Thompson, going back to Jake, who could not get past the yo-yoing and the inconsistent work and the starter then relief and then middle relief and then an inning. And it just, he had to get past that. And I think there were some guys in that Phillies clubhouse, Alvarado being one of them, I think, who kind of helped him just understand that this is the way it's going to be. And whatever they call on you to do, you've got to be ready. And that's the only way you're going to get to where you want to be, which is to be an everyday, an every fifth day starter, 6-day starter. And I think he just came to a realization that the only way he could get to that point was to show them that he could do whatever they asked, whenever they asked. And I think he just finally got to that point and found the confidence. And this is what we're seeing.
How important were the pitching coach and the manager at AAA this year in his development?
Well, I think Cesar Ramos has that calming influence on a lot of guys. I think that's one of his strengths is that he just finds a way to reach a guy and find what works with their personality to try and get that same point across. That look, everybody wants to be in the big leagues. Everybody wants to have that role that they're comfortable with, but that's not what the Phillies may need at that particular point. Most times it's not. And you have to be ready to be able to show that you can handle any situation they throw at you before you can get to the point where you get to where you want to be. And I think Ramos has a way of just kind of, keeping them level-headed, telling them, hey, look, this is what's going on in Philly now. They could be calling on you to do this or that. You just have to be ready. And I think that's the same with the position players. We've seen like with Weston Wilson, the Phillies call him up and he's not, his main positions are not corner outfielders, but that's where the Phillies needed him. So he had to just be ready to say, hey, look, I'll play wherever you want. If I have to sit 3 days and get 4 at-bats, then I have to be good with that too. I've got to find a way to make that work. And I think that's what Sanchez is finally just found that comfort zone, knowing that what's around the corner may not be what's right in front of him. And I think Ramos has that good personality to kind of convey that to some of these pitchers.
As frustrating as this bullpen has been at times, I wanted to focus on the resiliency of this team. You've watched a lot of baseball, a lot of different teams. Teams fold at times when they go down big in games, when they go down. This team doesn't seem to be afraid of the moment. I mean, you've got 5 instances where Harper ties it, but they blow it and lose it. Harper hits his 300th, they lose it. Turner hits the go-ahead. I mean, Turner and Harper going back and forth with the clutch moments. Alec Bohm, Bryson Stott, who you saw come through the system. Can you talk about the attitude of this team that they're never out of it, even if they can't hold it?
I think every player this year who has gone from AAA up and come back has said the same thing, that first of all, it is a fun clubhouse. There's a lot of personalities in there. There's a lot of fun in games. I think we see that carry over into their, celebrations of a base hit as opposed to even a walk-off hit. They have fun playing the game, and I think that kind of rubs off on everybody, keeps everybody loose. And I think that turns into a fact that, hey, look, we're down 5 runs in the 4th inning. We have plenty of time. We're down 3 runs in the 7th. We have plenty of time, and there's no panic. And that has carried over even to AAA. A lot of the guys down here, again, their pitching has been horrible at times, and they have come back from some really big deficits, won some crazy games, and I think it's the same thing. They have a lot of good personality guys, a lot of good clubhouse guys, and they're just not flustered by the moment. And if they come back and lose, well, there's tomorrow. Now, again, playoffs can't have that kind of attitude, but that's just what's kind of carried over from AAA to the majors. These guys have seen that. They've gone up in that clubhouse and just had a blast and just played loose and relaxed and not felt the pressure of, we're down 5 runs. that's a great thing to have, and to be able to know that on any given day, if Nola doesn't have his best stuff, or if Lorenzen gets whacked around only last 3 innings, we can still come back, and they've done it time and again.
Talk to us a little bit about the season. For people up here, we don't know much about Weston Wilson other than his home run. Weston Wilson has had a pretty historic season down in Lehigh Valley. Tell us a little bit about him.
Well, first of all, he is one of the most genuine players I've ever met. Down to earth man, very humble, works extremely hard. Again, can play every position but pitcher and catcher. So he's got a lot of value. But one thing he had that you couldn't shake was he has a confidence in himself, a belief that he belonged in the major leagues. And all spring and all summer, no matter how things were going for him, he went through some valleys. He believed that he was a major league player, and he played like that. He played hard every day. He prepared hard every day. And there's a lot of guys like that in the clubhouse in AAA, and many of them didn't make it to the majors this year, but that never stopped them from working. Usually you get to August 1st and you start wondering, are these guys going to start to check out, these minor league veterans, and say, hey, look, I'm not going anywhere. What's the point in pushing through? But they've got a clubhouse full of guys who have just continued to do that, and they've played pretty well. And again, they're a playoff caliber team. But Weston Wilson is one of those leaders. Jim Haley is another one who came over from the Rays organization. They have a lot of good character guys, a lot of guys who understand how to do things right. And that the hopefulness is that not only will Weston Wilson become maybe a major league, a solid major league bench player, but maybe he will help push along some of these other guys who have a high ceiling and just haven't found a way to get there yet, because it's about work ethic and it's about grinding through a long season. Simone Muzziotti has had a real good season in AAA. He was hitting 340, 350 for a long time. People were wondering why he wasn't getting called up. He has a lot of flaws. One of them is his work ethic. He's not the hardest worker. He's a great guy. He's a good teammate, but he's not the hardest worker. So having him stick around Weston Wilson and Jim Haley and a whole handful of guys, Scott Kingery busts his butt every day. Knows his number was probably not getting called at all this year, but that didn't change how he performed and how he prepared. So having Muzziotti around a bunch of guys like that, hopefully come next year, will help him take that next step. There's no doubt he's a major league level player, Simone Muzziotti, but having him around these other guys will pay off in the long run if he took it to heart. Again, I think he has taken some strides in preparation, but he's not where Weston Wilson is. He's not where Jim Haley is, or even Drew Ellis, or some of these Scott Kingery. You can go on and on. This whole clubhouse, these guys have really worked hard. 2:00, for a 7:00 game, 2:00, there is most of the infield is out there taking ground balls every day in July and August. And that says a lot about their character. That, again, they're out there working, trying to get better at their craft. They're taking balls at different positions. Rafael Marchand, I don't know how many times he has taken balls at second and short. He has no business doing that. But just to get out there and be around the guys and have some fun, and who knows, Carlos Ruiz was a second baseman at one point. So these guys just love the game. They love working at their craft, and I think Weston Wilson is at the top of that list. Again, he's a guy who came here with never been to the majors, but believing that he could be there. And again, I think he did the most with his opportunities there.
I wanted to ask about some of the arms. Obviously, went into the season hoping Andrew Painter could be something. He's recovering from his surgery. Mick Abel had some success, also some challenges. Talk about them a little bit, and can being at AAA help Mick Abel with some of the issues that he's had this year?
Well, what's concerning with Mick is his walk numbers are a little worse than they were last year. His last 4 starts in Reading, fantastic. 117 ERA, batters hit 108 against him, but he still had 11 walks in 23 innings, even though he gave up next to nothing. That's still an ongoing thing with him. He's different than Painter. When you talk to Painter, you just get a feeling like there's nothing that can shake him. The moment will never be too much for him, which is a great thing to see in a teenager at the time. He's got a special makeup. Mick Abel and Griff McGarry are more similar to each other than they are to Painter in that regard. McAble's first start this year, he got so amped up that he couldn't throw a strike if, he moved 20 feet away. He was too amped up, couldn't calm himself down, couldn't get out of the first inning. He's had a couple starts like that where things just implode on him and he can't get things right. Obviously, Griff McGarry, since his call up to AAA, he had 3 really bad starts, couldn't throw a strike. It was hard to watch, and they pretty much shut him down. So they're not really sure what they have in him. The off season and spring training for them, I think, are going to be very key. I think Mick will, again, get pushed to AAA, but again, they've got to work on something that allows him to repeat his mechanics, so that when things go a little haywire, he's not running every batter to a full count, an 8-9 pitch at bat where he can't put guys away. He can't get those 1, 2, 3 innings on 6, 7 pitches. That just doesn't happen for him. Same thing for Griff. Maybe Griff is more suited in a bullpen role. He's not a guy who's got a lot of, he didn't come up as a 7, 8, 9-year-old as a pitcher. I mean, he was up until halfway through college. He was not a full-time pitcher. So it just needs to kind of find out who he is. And Mick's got to find something to be able to repeat his mechanics he's got the stuff. There's no question his stuff will play at any level. He just needs to be able to repeat those and maintain the confidence that, okay, I just walked a guy on 4 pitches. Here's how I get back on track. And that's something he hasn't been able to do with any consistency. And the same thing for Griff.
Johan Rojas. He has been a blessing, at least defensively, on this team. In my mind, he makes everybody on the field better, not just the 2 corner outfielders. I think he gives confidence even to the infielders. Yet, for some reason, the Phillies are not using him consistently. Sometimes they have Christian Pache in. I know that they have Marsh here. Is there something about Johan Rojas' game? Yes, we know he doesn't have power, but so far he's at least hit for average up here and hit clutch. Is there something that you saw when he was down in Lehigh Valley that the Phillies see that is the reason they don't just plug him into center field right now?
I think it's more about what they believe in Marsh. I'm not sure about Pache. I don't, again, he had an extended rehab stint with us. I didn't, he's very athletic. He can run very well. I don't understand playing Pache over Johan Rojas, but I think they are married to Brandon Marsh, and there are stretches where Brandon Marsh looks phenomenal in all aspects of the game, and I get it. But eventually they're going to be stuck because you can't have a Rojas playing every day and a Marsh playing every day, somehow find a Schwarber at bats, and then God knows if Rhys Hoskins comes back and you have the whole thing with him and Harper at first base. They've got a lot of things to work through in the future. What I'm hopeful is that Rojas gets a legitimate chance come next spring that he can be the everyday center fielder. Just let it play out based on what you see, not on what you believe in Brandon Marsh. And that's not a knock on Brandon Marsh. Again, he has shown at times that he's an everyday center fielder. He's got skills, that they're better than most. But I think Rojas has kind of opened a lot of people's eyes, especially the fans, saying, hey, this guy just came out of nowhere from AA, and all of a sudden he just jumps right in. Not only can he play defense, but again, he is hit. Now his control of the strike zone, he still swings a lot of bad pitches. And I think next year you'll start to see guys, opposing pitchers figure that out, and it'll be up to him to respond to kind of, get a better idea of what's a strike. And if he can do that, then I think, again, the Phillies are going to be forced to play him more. But I don't think that's going to happen this year. But he has definitely opened eyes. I always thought he was an elite defensive player. I did not think he would hit like this in the major leagues right away.
Well, and I had heard an anecdote that he had approached the manager, not demanding playing time, but sort of asking where the holes in his game were. What were the things that he has to improve on? And Thompson was honest with him. So hopefully he takes that and improves on it. I wanted to ask you about somebody who I haven't asked you about before because I don't even know how to say his first name. Kerkering.
I knew it was coming.
Is it Orion? How do you say his first name?
I believe it's Orion.
Okay, so Orion Kerkering has a 1.63 ERA in almost 50 innings across 3 levels of the minor leagues with 71 strikeouts and 12 walks. And I keep reading about the guy's slider. Tell me what is going on there.
he's a unique story, and he's one I got on my little cheat sheet here. He's definitely one that come next spring training, he's going to be given every opportunity to be in the major league bullpen. Again, a guy with not a lot of innings on an arm. It's his fastball is really electric, and his slider is pretty impressive for a guy who's pitching in Double A still. He's not one of those ones again who he's got the right personality for it. He doesn't seem to be phased by the moment, And Reading, they've put him in, a lot of late inning situations, and he's done really well. He's thrown again. The most impressive thing is with those two pitches, he's thrown strikes consistently. The Phillies have a couple other guys in Double A or lower who can throw 100 miles an hour. One night it's there, one night who knows where it's going. That's not been Keckering's makeup so far this year. He has thrown strikes with regularity and produced in tough late inning situations. And I think there's a lot of optimism around this guy. He's come out of nowhere. It wasn't like he was, high draft pick, and he doesn't have a lot of innings on that body. He's got a great personality for that part of the bullpen, and I think he's going to be one that the Phillies, who knows what types of moves are made in the offseason and what openings there are in the bullpen. But I got to think that if he throws well in spring training, they're not going to say, "Hey, good job, go to AAA for a little while and then we'll see what you can do." He's really good. And you take a guy like McKinley Moore, who early on was given an opportunity because of injuries in the bullpen, and he really struggled. He still has that potential to be a late inning guy, upper 90s fastball, who can be really helpful for the Phillies. But Orion's kind of passed everybody else in the bullpen race in the minor leagues as one to look for to be that next guy to take that step. Moore's obviously dealt with a lot of injuries, and when he's come back, he's gone to Double A. But I think you're seeing the future of the Phillies back end of the bullpen right there if he continues to keep the attitude he's got and just amazing control of both those two pitches that are really lights out.
All right, Tom, we got 60 seconds left. Are the Phillies going to make the playoffs, and which wild card spot are they going to have?
There will be the number one wild card spot without question. I don't think any of those other teams are good enough, flat out.
Well, we will keep talking to you as the fall goes on, and keep talking to you about what we expect to see in the system, because they're going to need it. They've got a lot of decisions to make in the offseason. We'll get through this season, but they're going to need to figure out what the balance is on this roster with some of the big salaries they have. So we appreciate you always giving us some time, Tom Housenick. You have a great one.
Thanks, Jason and Jeff. Have a good weekend.